Hello, this is Albert. I'm back again, and this time we are doing Canto 7, or at least I hope we are. I've already lost one copy of this, or I was almost done. I hit a bad button. I'm trying to identify all the bad buttons and stay away from them. In any event, here we go. At least I hope so. But before we get into Canto 7 per se, last week someone brought up the question of contrapassio, and someone else gave a wonderful example, at least I thought it was a wonderful example, of contrapassio, a story at least, from the Twilight Zone series. And this is an episode from 1960. It's season 1, episode 28. And this is just an excerpt from it. It's sort of the punchline, if you will. The basic story is we have a gentleman, as the story opens, he's a thief. He's robbing a jewelry store, and that's what he does. You know, some people work as policemen, firemen, nurses, what have you. This particular guy, his career is a thief. Well, he was robbing a jewelry store, and it did not work out all that well for him. The police come, and he runs, and he's shot. And he wakes up, and there's this gentleman in a white suit who's ready to meet his every need. It takes him a while to figure out that what's happened is he's died, and this is a spiritual realm that he's in, and he gets his every need. Well, his needs or desires are about 4 of them: to rob things, to gamble, to drink, and hang out with, quote, dames, close quote. He gets all that, and the story now revolves around what happens next. And I'll let you see this and see what you think. And just remember, contrapassio, we have to understand it. It's very important. Don't forget that every canto, or I should say every circle, rather, to think about what the contrapassio is happening in that particular circle. And of course that applies to the one that we're looking at today, the Hoarders and the Spendthrifts. Now, here we go. We're going to start with Canto 7. Pape Satan Alepe. The voice of Plutus clucked these words at us. And that kind sage, to whom all things were known, said reassuringly, "Do not let fear defeat you. For whatever be his power, he cannot stop our journey down this rock." Plutus. Here he is. He is probably the god Pluto, and who is a god of the underworld. He's also the god of wealth and money. We get the words plutocracy and plutocrat from that. Well, Dante is imagining he's the monster guarding this particular circle, and he's yelling these words, Pape Satan Alepe. What does that mean? Well, most commentators say it doesn't mean much of anything. That basically, this fellow was, like many of the monsters and denizens of the areas of hell, he had lost some of his intellectual abilities, and basically what he's saying was gibberish. Other people have different opinions, but no one has really come up with a convincing to everybody translation of this. So it probably is gibberish. Now, this little video you can find on YouTube, and someone has seen fit to do the first 10 cantos of Dante's Inferno in rap. And that's right, that's what I said, R-A-P. So here it is. You can listen to, I would just say some of it, just to get the flavor of it. It's pretty clever, actually, and it's just another example of Dante's Divine Comedy having some impact or influence in our modern idioms, shall we say. Back from rap, we'll go on with Canto 7. Then he turned towards that swollen face of rage, crying, "Be quiet, cursed wolf of hell. Feed on the burning bile that rots your guts. This journey to the depths doesn't have a reason. For it's willed on high where Michael wrought a just revenge for the bold assault on God." Once again, Virgil bests a satanic monster by the word of the higher power, God. God is ruler of hell, and these fiendish spirits cannot stop or hinder the will of God. And the reference, of course, to Michael is the battle of the good angels led by Michael the archangel against the rebellious ones. Now, the effect on Plutus is, as sails swollen by the wind, when the ship's mast breaks, collapse, deflated, tangled in a heap, just so the savage beast fell to the ground. And then we started down a fourth abyss, making our way along the dismal slope, where all the evil of the world is dumped. Ah, God's avenging justice. Who could heap up suffering and pain as strange as I saw here? How can we let our guilt bring us to this? Now, here's what we know so far. We have Plutus, who guards the entrance into the fourth level. Again, Dante retools a character from Greek myth. That's Pluto, pagan god of wealth and the pagan god of the underworld. And he's a great guardian of this circle, which is all about avarice. Plutus' rage foreshadows the rage and inhabits the circle. The hoarders are outraged by the spendthrifts. Gibberish serves as either a warning or communication to Satan or the travelers. Virgil rebukes him, and he collapses into a heap. And I might mention in passing that while I was going around the internet, I came across this, the Plutus Foundation, which is sponsoring the Plutus Awards podcast. And so I don't know if they read their Dante, or probably not. He would not be a great example. But again, the word Plutus means money, plutocracy, plutocrat, that sort of thing. We continue. More shades were here than anywhere above. And from both sides, to the sound of their own screams, straining their chests, they rolled enormous weights. And when they met and clashed against each other, they turned to push the other way, one side screaming, "Why hoard?" The other side, "Why waste?" And so they moved back around the glooming circle, returning on both sides to opposite poles to scream their shameful tune another time. Now, let's again look at what we got. Hoarders versus wasters. Each side holds objectives that are the antithesis of the others. Dante is unable to make out any individual identities. We have the external dimness, symbolizes no life of God within, and indiscernible lives lived. And we have the communal rage, which is common sin. They're all upset and mad because they believe opposite things. And so the punishment is each group pushes a boulder in a semicircle towards the other group. Why waste? Why squander? Again, as we continue, again, they came to clash and turn and roll forever in their semicircle joust. I, my heart pierced by such a sight, spoke out. "My master, please explain to me who these people? Were they all priests, these tonsured souls I see to our left?" Interesting question, huh? And here we go. Here's a cartoon. We got these people rolling these massive objects, and they're just mad. They're opposed to each other, but they both have the same sin, just different manifestations. They don't have a reasonable use of money. So here we go. This is a commentary from Columbia. Dante views the moral pathology of these sinners as excess. So you have opposite poles, don't you? Whether it be excess in holding on or excess in letting go. Their sin is lack of misura. No spending that they did was done with measure. Misura / measure is quality of mind that is balanced. So what you hear is your lack of balance. They've gone to extremes. It's proportionate and moderate with respect to desire. The possession of misura results in self-control. Dante introduced the concept of misura to the Commedia in Inferno 7. The word appears here for the first time in the context of wealth management, human attitudes towards wealth. And so it makes a difference what we think about wealth management. And you need to be in the middle. That's what Dante is saying. Okay, Dante emphasizes his deployment of a paradigm built on two extremes by constructing a contrapposto, here's that word, contrapposto, in which there are two groups of souls who move towards each other along two halves of one circle, pushing weights. When they meet, they hurl opposing insults at each other, calling out, "Why do you hoard?" and "Why do you squander?" In this way, Dante constructs the two groups of sinners as opposites but analogous. So they move around the sorry circle from left to right to the opposing point. And it's sort of the idea that the two extremes kind of meet in their attitude, which is often what happens when you have two extremes of anything. They are often in the same attitude. He thus presents the two groups of souls in Inferno 7 as conjoined but opposites. They move along one circle, but as two opposing cohorts. They move in opposite directions, but always towards each other, towards the mean that they were unable to reach in life. The sins that separate these souls into two groups are contrary to each other. Their opposing guilts divide their ranks. Dante's descriptions consistently emphasize the two groups of souls as opposite. And here they are. They're opposite. We have one band pushing this way and one band pushing that way. And they are opposites, but once again, they're opposite, but in a very strange way. They're complementary. That they're both away from the mean of reason. They've lost reason, but in different ways, but over the same subject. Let's continue. He said, in their first life, all you see here had such myopic minds, they could not judge with moderation when it came to spending. Their barking voices make this clear enough. When they arrive at the 2 points on the circle where opposing guilt divides them into two. The ones who have the bald spot on their heads were priests, popes, and cardinals, whom avarice is most likely to prevail. And I, master, in such a group as this, I should be able to recognize a few who dirty themselves by such crimes as these. And he replied, yours is empty hope. Their undistinguished lies that make them foul now make it harder to distinguish them. And of course, the obvious point here is Dante is criticizing the church, and one can criticize the church and still be a loyal Catholic. Dante was all that. He was not some sort of disbeliever or humanist or what have you. deeply believed in the church, and so much more the outrage at people who misused their office because they developed a sin of avarice. Another point worth mentioning is that Aristotle's concept of virtuous mean implies, in the context of wealth management, a genuine appreciation of moderate material comfort. In other words, to put this idea into Dante's own contemporary context, Dante's use of the Aristotelian template in Inferno 7 distanced him from a posture of Franciscan disdain for all material goods. And that was sort of the issue, really, in the 13th and 14th century. St. Francis of Assisi founded the Franciscans, and they were, at least at the very beginning, very much opposed to having any money whatsoever, any material possessions. As time went on and they became more successful, some of them relaxed that a bit. But then you had a group of strict Franciscans, so-called spiritual Franciscans, who accept no ownership whatsoever and thought the church should be that way too, no ownership whatsoever. Well, naturally, the church has always had a idea, just as what Dante is saying here, an idea of the middle ground, not going to one extreme, such as communism or hard socialism, or the other idea of that sort of Ayn Rand type of extreme libertarianism. We're in the middle. We can have personal wealth, we can enjoy it, but we also have to remember we have a duty towards our fellows in our community in general to use our wealth in a positive way. And this really was a conflict, and the idea that the church had gotten too wealthy, so many avaricious people, and that was somewhat true. There's so much power and wealth accumulated in the church. And there's a story that supposedly happened, about, say, 50 years after Dante died. There's two cardinals walking in the papal palace and seeing all the wealth and extravagance and everything. And one cardinal started thinking about the story in Acts where St. Peter is confronted with a beggar near the temple. And the beggar is he's crippled, and he's looking for some money. Well, Peter didn't have any, so he said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have I give to you. In the name of Jesus, arise and walk." And so the two cardinals are walking themselves down the hall, and one said to the other, "Well, it's no longer necessary, we don't have to say anymore, silver and gold have we none." And the other one looked at him and says, "Well, that's true, but now we can't say arise and walk either." So now we'll continue on 37 here. However, Dante's thinking about the church inclines him towards the Franciscan posture with its strong celebration of poverty as a positive value. And this very canto will indict the avarice of high prelates, popes, and cardinals, thus initiating an ongoing critique of great importance to the Commedia. What they're saying here basically is we're going to see a lot more clerical people as we go through hell. At the same time, when he has had his more secular hat on, Dante is quite capable of appreciating the action of Bendare, of those great lords who demonstrate the virtue of liberality or generosity in their courts as a sign of their cortesia. We can therefore see in Inferno 7 a fascinatingly complex and nuanced approach towards wealth. And that's what we should have as well. It's just not simple to know how wealth should be used. And simple ideas often bring a tremendous lot of grief and hardship. Now we'll continue in Canto 7. "You see, my son, the short-lived mockery of all the wealth that is in fortune's keep. over which the human race is bickering. For all the gold that is or ever was beneath the moon won't buy a moment's rest for even one of these weary souls. And isn't that ironic? Master, now tell me what this fortune is you touched upon before. What is she like, who holds all worldly wealth within her fist? And he said to me, O foolish race of man, how overwhelmingly is your ignorance! Now listen while I tell you what she means. That one whose wisdom knows infinity made all the heavens and gave each one a guide, and each sphere shines on all the others. So light is spread with equal distribution. For worldly splendors he decreed the same and ordained a guide and a general ministress, who would at her discretion shift the world's vain wealth from nation to nation, house to house, with no chance of interference from mankind. So while one nation rules, another falls, according to whatever she decrees, her sentence hidden like a snake in the grass. Your knowledge has no influence on her, for she foresees, she judges, and she rules her kingdom as the other gods do theirs. Her changes never take a rest. Necessity keeps her in constant motion, as men come and go to take their turn with her. And this is she, so crucified and cursed. Even those in luck who should be praising her instead revile her and condemn her actions. But she's blessed, and in her bliss hears nothing. With all God's joyful first created creatures, she turns her spear, and blessed turns it with joy. What Dante has done here is made fortune, well, the idea of fortune is basically luck. And certainly the pagan idea was that there was a goddess fortune, was arbitrary and capricious, and luck just happened. Things happen. And that's just it. Whereas what Dante is saying here is that really fortune is a ministering angel, and it's basically devised to keep people humble and to change things about, and it's just not anything we can do about it, so to speak, but it's God's providence. That's a word we sometimes hear. It's not some kind of random, blind chance, and that's just coming and beating us up, but it's a plan of God, and God's in control. It's pretty much what Dante's saying, and we'll read the commentary here too. And yet another twist in his extraordinarily complex response to classical culture, Dante, through Virgil, refutes the classical understanding of the goddess Fortuna, which holds that she is blind and therefore arbitrary and capricious in her distribution of material goods, arbitrarily causing some human fortunes to rise and others to fall. Instead, he insists that Fortuna is a minister of God, positioned in heaven with the other deities. In effect, Dante declassicizes and Christianizes the classical goddess. A deep cause of this move vis-a-vis Fortuna might be to diffuse the abetting social anxiety and envy that was discussed as a primary feature of Florentine life in the introduction to Inferno 6. As a homeless and stateless exile, Dante has every reason to fear the capriciousness of Fortuna. If instead we conceive Fortuna to be a minister of divine providence, her actions are by definition not capricious, therefore less threatening. Although we cannot understand or appreciate her actions, they are willed by providence, and therefore must be seen as part of a larger divine plan, which in turn must be construed as good. So the various knocks of life, or the good things of life, must be seen as not permanent, but as an instrument or something from God that fits in his plan. And this applies to us as individuals, as communities, as a nation. Italy was great at one point, then the trade routes changed, and then there was France and England. then America became powerful. And will America stay powerful forever? Well, the only type of forever is God's kingdom. There's no other kingdom on earth that will last forever. And that is just the story of it. Now, here is a piece that's part of a bigger piece called Carmina Burana. C-A-R-M-I-N-A, new word B-U-R-A-N-A. What happened was, in the 19th century, a number of medieval poems were found in a monastery in Austria. Well, they weren't liturgical or religious poems. They were somewhat, well, not just somewhat, they're very secular, and some of them very sexual. And this one was about fortune. And it really went back to the Latin, and I mean Latin as in the Roman version of Fortuna, as Fortuna as this capricious goddess. And you'll see this here in the video. We'll have a picture of Fortuna as the capricious goddess. And so these poems were collected, and a German composer by the name of Karl Orff, O-R-F-F, Karl Orff, in the 1930s composed a musical version of these. And this is the one we're going to play is very, very famous. And we'll have the Latin and we'll have the English version or translation as well. And this is just the contrasting of what is our Christian view of the ups and downs of life. After looking at O Fortuna, we can also realize that idea has kind of penetrated a lot of the so they say, nooks and crannies of our modern life. And this is from a MSN article you see about in the money personal finance area. And the article was, the typical retiree's income is shockingly low. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But there's one passage in this that's really struck me as kind of curious. And this is coming towards the end. And here it is. Although 56% of retiree households brought in a pre-tax income of less than $50,000, while a lucky 13% earned at least $100,000. Lucky, huh? Well, maybe some of them were lucky. They just were sitting around. Someone dropped a lot of money on them. I don't know, or just, somehow perhaps divine providence happened, or just lots and lots of hard work. I don't know. Who knows why? But it's interesting. The word here is what? Lucky. Well, here we go. O Fortuna. Okay. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for this week. Now we have a little bit of Canto 7 to go, but it really fits best with Canto 8. It really goes together with Canto 8. We're going to talk about the violent, sitting in the river Styx and hitting on each other for all eternity. Sounds like a lot of fun now, doesn't it? Not really.